Is liberty dying where you live? Escape to Keene at freekeene.com.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are getting a somewhat late start onto the afternoon after a delicious lunch. I don't know where you went, but we had a good crowd at Keene Buffet. Actually, we're not even really that late, 2 minutes. So welcome back. Thank you for coming out to Keenevention this afternoon. We had a great rainy morning on this warm, almost summer-like day here in New Hampshire. So welcome to everybody who is new for the afternoon sessions. Make sure you go around and introduce yourself, talk to folks. There's all kinds of interesting characters and people to meet here. Now I want you to meet the next panel, the Porcupreneurs panel. It's kind of a new term for the movement here. Of course, the porcupine is the mascot of the Free State Project. And Porcupreneur is obviously a crunching together of porcupine and entrepreneur. And so hopefully this panel will be covering both housing and business opportunities. We've got entrepreneurs, people here who have put some money on the line in hopes of investing and turning a profit. And I imagine some of those profits are going right back into activism because that's just the kind of people that we are. And one of those guys I know is doing that is Mark Warden. He's one of the sponsors of my radio show, Free Talk Live, and I'm really appreciative of that. And he's also the top sponsor of this event. So make sure you stop by and see him later on when he'll be at his table or mingling about. If you're considering real estate in New Hampshire, either buying or selling, Mark can help you out with that. And Mark will introduce the rest of the panel. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thank you, Ian. This is a great event. It's great to see so many people down here in Keene. And my name is Mark Warden. I'll be the moderator today, facilitating the discussion. And really, this is a two-pronged panel. Part of it's going to be talking about entrepreneurship in general, and particularly here in New Hampshire. Everybody on the panel is an entrepreneur, as well as real estate. So if you have questions, please come on up today. We want this to be as interactive as possible. We'll do some introductions. I'll have some questions prepared for these guys, but if you have a question, please come up to the microphone right where Ian is there so the audio gets recorded. So I'm in the real estate business, Porcupine Real Estate. I've been a realtor for about 20 years. And I've started my business here in New Hampshire, specializing in Free State Project members, libertarians. 99% of my clients are liberty-oriented, and I work with a lot of relocations. And we've grown over the last few years. I want to introduce the other panelists. To my left here is William Kostric. William is the director and founder of the Quill Clubs. The Quill is a private membership club in Manchester, and they recently expanded to Henniker as well. He's also been a business owner, retail business owner in the past, and at one time was a professional poker player. Doesn't get any more entrepreneurial than that. At the end of the table is Chris Suprock. Chris founded Suprock Technologies. Now, this is technical, so follow along. To commercialized image fraud detection software on a package called Rigor, which automatically detects Photoshop edits in digital pictures. Academic and scientific journal publishers use that software to bulk screen author submissions and check for unwanted edits. Also, during graduate school, Chris developed wireless sensor systems for machining operations to monitor the torque, temperature, and acceleration from end milling tool holders. Project involved into an industrial collaboration with several machining companies, and today they design electromechanical hardware and sensors for a variety of industries. Chris lives in Exeter with his wife and toddler over there, and he is also active politically. I've neglected to mention that William Kostric also is an awesome liberty activist and has done great work in police accountability, particularly in the area of audio recording police. So with that, why don't you guys, we'll start with you, William. Give us a little introduction about some of the businesses you're doing. Tell us more about what you're doing with the Quill and how that's developed. And then we'll invite some questions. If nothing else, I'll have some questions for you as well.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mark. The Quill developed because the activism in Manchester was growing, the scene was starting to grow up, and we didn't really have a regular meeting place. We met in bars and in people's houses and wherever we could find a spot. Speaking of Porcupreneurs, Murphy's Tap Room was opened by Free Stater, and that was originally where we were meeting for a long time. He eventually became quite successful, and his success was one of the reasons that the location became not that great for us to meet at, because it became very loud, and our group likes to talk a lot, and it's difficult to talk over, sporting events and all of the other activities that were going on. So we were glad that he was successful, but we also needed a regular place to meet. And so I'd had an idea about doing a private club that would be based on membership dues, and I had spoke to Mark about it. And I had started looking for some places, didn't find exactly what I was looking for, and the idea just kind of languished for a little while. And I'd say maybe a year and a half later, Ofer Nabe, who's my partner, had basically the same idea and approached Mark about it, and he put us together. We started looking for a place and found a place, and went from there. One of the original I won't say disagreements, but it was a little bit different in the vision for the place that we had to work out, was a question of how open we wanted to be as far as membership and bringing more people in. And we went through a lot of growing pains figuring out how to price the membership to get in the people that we wanted to get in, and sort of price out the people that we didn't want around, people that were just paying a membership due and kind of treating the place like it was their living room, basically trying to live there for $40 a month. And those were the people we kind of wanted to not be there. But we also wanted a place that was going to be productive, where people could have a place to work on their projects and get together and meet with others when they needed to collaborate. And that's really what it's turned into recently. So it was tough for a little while there, because the pool that we were drawing from was really low. And we've seen some other businesses, for instance, the Porcupine Party Bus, which Mark is a partial owner in, as am I, and we purchased the bus with the idea of doing tours and being able to easily move Liberty activists to events that needed to be done. And much the same with the Quill, we were a little early on that idea. We thought there was enough people, but it turned out that there really wasn't. And so the bus is not being used as heavily as we would like it to have been, but that's beginning to change too. We're getting so many new movers that I think the market is finally catching up to us. So that's pretty awesome. And with that, I'll pass it to Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris. I started my business actually in Pennsylvania when I was in college. Mark talked about the image analysis software stuff that I worked on. Really, out of high school and college, I knew that I couldn't work in a corporate environment. I have lots of family members that I see working in that environment, and it's very stifling for a lot of creativity. One of the interesting things that I notice about the technical environment, especially software and hardware development, is that larger companies don't really have a strong internal R&D program. So there's a big advantage for people who are willing to take a personal risk on their own and try and develop innovative products that appeal to larger companies that want to purchase them. And that's a lot of the business models that are going on in bigger American companies. Is the R&D internally is somewhat weak, and there's a big opportunity for us, people that are creative, people that can come up with new ways of doing things technically, to offer solutions to companies that don't fund their own internal research or are looking for something external that they can acquire, that's a very interesting opportunity for engineers, programmers, and I know there's a lot of people that are very savvy in that area in the movement. So that's kind of the background that I started from and some of my perspective of why I started my own company. We're in Exeter today. Really, there are two of us that do most of the engineering design. It's myself and an electrical engineer, and how I look at a company is it doesn't have employees. Somebody is not an employee of the company. They are an entrepreneur themselves. And I think that's a very key thing to think of when you start a business, is that when somebody comes to work for you, they are not an employee. They are somebody that is there because they are an entrepreneur themselves. Even if you work for a large corporation, or if you work for a company that is very structured, you are still an entrepreneur. You're not an employee. You're providing them a service. It's basically you are a sole proprietor. And I think it's very important for us to think of that when we start businesses, and when we hire people in and say, here, I've got a job for you to do, that they're not subservient, or they're not somebody who's an employee in the classical sense, but they can contribute just as many good ideas, or they should have just as much of a say in the course of the business as you do, because they're part of it. They're benefiting from the same growth and the same opportunity that business has to offer. So that's some of my perspective, a little bit of background on me, and if you have any technical questions, feel free to ask, but I'm not going to go into that because that's not really the topic here.
Well, if we're going to be talking about entrepreneurial opportunities and the spirit thereof, and what some people consider the American dream, it all sounds great running your own show, but I'm sure there are some pitfalls and some downsides to it. Can you, either of you guys, or both of you guys, speak to some of the downside about being your own boss and being an entrepreneur?
Well, the downside is going broke, and working hard while you're doing it. I've been in sales for most of my life that I wasn't in business for myself, and I really enjoyed the freedom of it. I like the idea that if you don't produce, you don't get paid, but you have to really be ready for the ups and downs. You have to be ready for the weeks that you work hard and don't make anything, and you have to be able to save and budget for the times, for the dry times, because they're going to happen, and you're going to have big sales, and you're going to make big money, and you can't convince yourself that it's going to be that way all the time. So that's always a big mistake with small businesses in general, is undercapitalization and people, just not budgeting. You really have to be able to budget yourself and see the long term when it comes to that sort of thing. I do want to mention what Chris alluded to with the there not being employees, and I think this is an area that I'd like to see more progress in, and that's people opening employee-owned businesses, really worker-owned companies, as opposed to the corporate employee model. I think there's really a lot of potential there. So.
Yeah, basically, I like what you said about the risk involved. I mean, starting a business, there is a lot of risk involved in that. There's no doubt about that, and there are dry times. So really cultivating a family, I guess, around the few people that start a business is the important part, because there has to be some communication that goes on, especially between the primary contributors in the company. So in my company, there are really two technical contributors, myself and my friend. And both of us, we know what's going on at all times. And if you're running a business, you've got to be very forthcoming in a small business with your people, because if you're not, they'll be suspicious, or they'll say, well, what's going on with sales? What's happening? And obviously it affects payroll. It affects what's going on next week or next month, or what we can do as far as growth or whatever. So it becomes very challenging at times when you're starting up and you have a few customers. There's a lot of patience involved, and there's some luck, really, because you've got to make connections. At any one time, you have to have 10 or 12 irons in the fire, so to speak, with leads and people that are potential projects that you can work on. And it only takes one to make you a winner, really. So if you are patient and you're able to recognize opportunities, I guess is the last thing I want to say on that. You've got to be able to make judgments about what opportunities are going to provide the most yield. And that's sometimes very difficult to do, especially when you're bidding on a project, or when you have a client that says, oh, well, I think the potential revenue stream out of this product is X. Do you trust their numbers? You have to make a gut judgment at some times, and that can be very hard. That's the hardest thing to do. So I guess, yeah, I agree completely, though, about being like a family. I think you've got to not treat people like employees and really communicate with them, because their input will sometimes change your mind in the course of how you're running your business in very critical ways.
And you kind of hit the nail on the head with honesty, not just with your partners if you're in business with other people, but with yourself. A lot of people, it seems like when you're in the business, it's easy to delude yourself. I asked a question earlier about people who are involved in activism and reporting on their own activism, and you lose perspective, and that can happen in business. One of the single most important skill in poker is actually being able to correctly assess your skill level and other people's skill level. And I've noticed that a lot of people are pretty good at assessing the skill levels of other people, but not themselves. And if you're not able to sit down at a table, look around and say, wow, these guys are actually better than me, and get up and walk away, then you're going to be in bad shape. There was a guy named Eric who they said was the 10th best stud player in the world, and his problem was his ego only allowed him to play with the other 9. So needless to say, if he had been better at assessing his skill, he could have been a very rich person by choosing to play with a lot of other people, but his pride only allowed him to play with world champions, and as a result, he was never successful.
Yeah, I agree totally with that. And on the line, when you look for people to work with, you want to find people that are smarter than yourself in whatever their skill area is. That is the most critical thing that you can do, because none of us are brilliant in every particular area or have skill sets. You have to find somebody who's brilliant in their own right and that can complement what you can do. So the hardest part of starting a business is knowing yourself, knowing what traps you might fall into because of your personality and your ambitions, and then finding somebody who can complement that or level you, basically, so that you don't go off on a tangent or you don't go off on something that's not wise because you're not checked. You need somebody, and that's why it's important for the communication, so that you can communicate with somebody of equal level than you that has different attributes and different skills.
Is it safe to say that often we are friends with people that are very similar to ourselves personality-wise? Typically you like somebody who's kind of like you, but when you're actually going to start a business or work a business with somebody, you really want somebody who's complementary. Right, it's not that important that you always agree on everything, but rather you have a little bit of push and pull, and they offset each other's weaknesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And disagreement is a healthy thing, and being able to go through it without getting into anger or getting into resentment, and that can be very difficult. Well, it can be very easy, and it can be very difficult. It's very difficult when times are tough, when there are difficult decisions to be made, and those are critical decisions for the business and for income. And it can be very easy. I guess in that sense, it's just like any relationship, like a marriage. If times are good, things are easy. If times are tough, it might be harder. So interpersonal relationships with the people that you're working with are critical. And being able to remain logical, remain objective about stuff, that is the key. And being able to listen. I mean, that's being objective is one thing, but listening to what somebody else has to say and how they see it is just as important.
I'd say we've been lucky in that we've had a great panel of friends and other businessmen that have been willing to sit down and listen and give us input, even though they weren't financially involved, which is probably better even than having someone who's financially involved. They just sit down because they're your friend and they care about you and you respect their opinion, and they'll sit down and just point out things that you've never seen before. That's what crowdsourcing problems is about. You get enough eyes on it, somebody sees the solution that you don't see.
All right, let's change the direction a little bit. And since everybody in this room wants drastically smaller government, if any at all, well, how has the regulatory environment here affected your business? And you can speak to that, and also whether New Hampshire you feel has any benefits, or even the towns you're in are better than others in regards to regulation.
Well, in our situation...
William, do we need to cut off the video camera right now?
Yeah, right.
Before you answer this?
No, I think it'll be all right. We went down to the town hall in Manchester, and I don't know how applicable this is going to be to most businesses or what it is that you're specifically trying to do, but I'll just tell you our story. I went down and we were looking at a piece of property. I didn't know how many people we were going to have inside. I thought, it could be a couple hundred, whatever. I don't know what the fire code is. The front door just swings right open into the space, which is not good for security, but it's also not good for the cold. You want to have like an airlock, so you're not spending a ton of money on heat and just blowing your heat out the front door. So we needed to build a vestibule. The place itself didn't have any light switches. Everything was turned on and off from the breaker box. So there was work, a lot of work that needed to be done. And I went down to the town hall, this was in Manchester, to try to find out what the state required. And after a long time of not being able to get a straight answer, the lady behind the desk said to me, "If you're going to put a nail in the wall, you need a license." And I just kind of shook my head.
Permit.
And a permit, right. And I just kind of shook my head and walked out. So the next thing was the fire situation, because I didn't want to sign a lease on the building and then have the fire department come down and say, oh, if you're going to have more than X number of people, you're going to need to put in a sprinkler system, and that's going to cost all of this money, and then have to say, well, gee, I don't really want to pay to put a sprinkler system in someone else's building, but I've already signed a lease. So I was trying to avoid all of that. Called down to the to speak to. First thing, I just asked the secretary, surely the code must be online somewhere where I can look at it. No, it's not. Okay, so I can come down and look at it, right? And she said exactly, well, you can come down, but it's volumes and volumes, and you're not going to understand it anyways. And I really wanted to say, don't you see a problem with that? Like, isn't that its own issue? But I didn't. I said, well, certainly there must be someone there who understands all of this, and perhaps you can let me talk to them. So she put me in touch with the guy who does the inspections, and I began asking him, questions that I thought a guy who does fire inspections for a living should know, and he seemed reluctant to answer. I don't know if he felt like, I don't know what his deal was, but the bottom line was he wasn't very forthcoming. And in the end, I said, well, how about this? Why don't you come down and look at the place, and then do your inspection, and then tell me what I need to do, so I know, before I sign this lease, so I can make a decision. And he said, well, we don't work that way. You don't get to schedule an appointment with us. The way it works is you have to get your paperwork from the city, and then the city schedules an appointment, and we come out only after your paperwork is straight with the city. And I'm like, but I can't get my paperwork straight with the city without signing a lease, and I don't want to sign a lease without the, yeah. So in the end, we decided to completely ignore them. And it is my strong belief that if we had tried to comply with the state, we would never have opened our doors. And I base that on seeing some other people who have tried to open their business and comply, and watching them literally go broke in the process of trying to comply. So I just ignored them. 3 years later, neither the city nor the fire department have been in. They came, and the fire station is right across the street from us, so they definitely know we're there. They came and knocked on the door and asked to do an inspection, and I said no, and they left, and that was 2 years ago. Since then, we've had a porcupine flag and a few other flags hanging out front, and I have some other stories I can tell, but I won't. But the fact of the matter is, they know that we're there, and they are apparently content to ignore us. So I just don't think that they want to do I don't think they want to do their inspection for the world. And I'm pretty sure they understand that when they come to do it, it's all going to be videotaped, and it's all going to go on YouTube. And just something about video cameras and bureaucrats. They don't like them, so.
That's a lot more difficult than, I guess, in my line of work, because you're dealing with a building, you're dealing with people, and then the occupancy stuff. Now, in my line of work, there's a couple of issues that we deal with regards to bureaucrats. If you're an engineer and you're doing anything with, I guess, publicly visible, like infrastructure, there are insane licensing requirements. You have to be able to meet state's requirements. You have to be able to be a PE. For instance, civil work like bridges, things like that. Because if anything goes wrong, the state is culpable for a public infrastructure problem. Now, thankfully, I don't do that line of work, so I don't have to deal with that. However, a lot of my customers are larger companies, and they play by the rules to a T. So they've got armies of people that are responsible for compliance. And in the process of dealing with larger companies, sometimes you run into things like, I guess, invasive questioning or things in preparatory for a contract or moving forward on a project that can make you uncomfortable. They'll want to know things about your personal history, your business history, how you handle your finances. For instance, I just got a contract recently with a large organization that hired a compliance agency to go through a background check and kind of screen who I was, just to make sure that I was an appropriate contractor to be doing work for them for tax purposes. So you run into that a lot in the technical industry, and it depends on who you work with. If you work with the smaller companies, usually they don't go to that extreme because they can make a judgment, or you're very close to who's in charge of the company, and they're making that call themselves. So they're more willing to take risk, but the larger companies tend to be risk adverse, and they need to have paperwork for everything, which can be kind of frustrating. And that's all really prompted by the state in the legal system, the state in general, regardless of where the company's at. So that can be very frustrating because you know the root cause of it, and you know in the past there have been issues that have been gone through the justice system regarding somebody or some problem that happened that could have been dealt with on a personal contract basis or on a one-on-one basis, but instead it went through because there's many laws regarding contracts with engineering work and regards to how people get paid and then the taxes that are involved. So that's the most of my frustrations really with bureaucracy. I tend to stay away from it as much as possible. If you're running a company and you're paying somebody and they want to buy a house, that's another whole story and scenario. Banks are just like big companies. They want to see that the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. Typically, somebody would have to be on W-2 for at least a while before they're able to get a mortgage. Then payroll service gets involved. You've got a myriad of taxes and fees that you have to pay for that, which is quite frustrating because your person's not getting the money, it's going to the state. And we all know how that goes. So I guess any business, you're going to run into this. Locally, I haven't had much of an issue with the town or anything like that. I deal with a fellow that I'm friends with to rent my office space, so that always helps as well, so you don't have to deal with zoning and that sort of thing, and you do what you can, I guess.
And for those of you who are new to the area or don't live here yet, keep in mind that every town in New Hampshire has its own zoning and building regulations. There are over 200 towns in the state. If you're from other states where counties are very strong, it's different here. Here you have a lot of state level regulations, but then you even have more local town regulations. Manchester is one of the worst for construction, housing, operating a business.
I was definitely just going to add that exact point. Don't take that experience to mean it's that way throughout the state. There are a few spots that are known for being more difficult than others, and Manchester's one of them. But unless you need a large, unless it's a public-facing business where you need to be around the population center and you can open your business in a smaller area, you're probably going to run into a lot fewer issues.
Right, most of you have heard about Grafton. Grafton is a town with no zoning regulations or requirements. Basically, as long as you've had a state-approved septic tank, you can build whatever you want on the property, do whatever you want there. And the problem is that there's not much of a population base. So if you're counting on retail sales, it's a problem unless you're going to deliver them to people.
Right. Yeah. My line of work, I don't have to deal with a storefront, right? I don't have to have people coming in to buy things or to provide a service to somebody that would walk through the front door. So, I mean, I guess I have an advantage in that way that I don't have to deal with that.
And going back to risk, this is one of those things where, in my opinion, it's just easier to ask forgiveness later than to try and ask permission up front. And so if you're not very risk averse, you can push ahead in a lot of areas, and take that route and take a risk that it may come back to bite you. It hasn't us, it's worked out, but it very well could have, but that's what we made the decision to do.
All right, we're going to change direction again, talk about real estate a little bit. We'll start with Chris, because you live in Exeter, which is it's out towards Portsmouth, out towards the seacoast area, for those who don't know. And then I think you recently purchased a bug out location or a more rural getaway. I don't know if you want to disclose where that is or not. We respect your privacy, but it's in New Hampshire. So why don't you talk about the quality of life in some of these towns, and for those of the audience who are new to the state, what some of the differences are.
Okay. The thing I've seen in Exeter is that people are generally well-intentioned, but good intentions don't really create good government necessarily. A lot of what's going on in Exeter right now is there's a push to have Exeter become a little Portsmouth. And Exeter is not designed to be a little Portsmouth. Its population doesn't support that. The businesses there aren't designed for that. Now, there's a lot of contention going on in the town right now because the academy is so large. There are many people there that are statists and support big government, as we know where the governor comes from. And Exeter as a town is very stifling, I think, for people who are liberty-minded. The Republican committee there, for instance, which I'm the vice chair, is very active, but it's like pushing a rope up a hill. Anything fiscally conservative is difficult at best in Exeter. Now, a lot of the seacoast, you'll end up seeing that sort of scenario. I believe, I'm not certain, is a lot of population, people from Massachusetts that commute to Boston, that move to the seacoast area, and they want to get away from the taxes and the regulation in Massachusetts, and then they go ahead and vote for people that want to raise taxes, which is kind of a frustrating scenario. But otherwise, the seacoast area is very beautiful. There's a lot of opportunity there. I mean, this is the positive thing about the seacoast area. If you want to start a storefront business, that's the place to do it, either Manchester, seacoast area, Concord, population centers. Now, the seacoast also has tourist draw, which is kind of nice. A lot of people go there for Hampton Beach, Portsmouth, and you'll get, if you're running a business of that nature, it's very helpful to have your company located there. Now, Joanna and I just purchased a location in Warren, which is up north of here.
I don't even know where that is.
Well, it's, I guess, if you get off the Plymouth exit on 93 and head north for a long time, you'll come to it, and it's at this little notch of parkland that's in between the national forest.
So more moose than people in Warren.
Yes, more moose than people. And out of that experience, I do have some advice for real estate purchases. If you're looking to get a parcel of land, look for a piece of land that has issues with what's located on the property versus the deed. Because, for instance, we bought this property and there was a mobile on it. And the deed for the town said no mobiles. Warren doesn't care. Warren's not going to enforce that. Warren doesn't have the manpower or the interest in enforcing that. However, banks, when they see that, they recoil like vampires to sunlight because they see a deed and they say something in the deed that there's a property on there. They're not going to finance it for anyone, so the owner has a very difficult time selling the piece of property. Now, that makes things like owner financing very nice because the person needs to sell the property. Nobody else can get bank financing because there's an issue that's an easily changed or easily amended issue with the deed. And you're able to set up a personal contract with somebody make a down payment, and then owner finance whatever the balance is. So I would look into that if you can. That's a good way to purchase a piece of land without having to deal with the bank and without having to go through the mortgage and the rubber glove and everything else that's involved with getting a mortgage.
Say, a property that we just expanded into in Henniker was also owner financed, and they were having a difficult time selling it on the market for a different reason. It's 2 geodesic domes and completely unique construction methods. The matter of fact, the 2 domes themselves use different construction methods, and they're both non-standard. So it was really extremely difficult for them to either, one, even get a correct appraisal, because how do you go about appraising something like that? There really is no comps, because there's nothing comparable to a 2-story geodesic dome connected to another 2-story geodesic dome by a ranch style, I don't know, hallway. And so not only couldn't he really get a reasonable appraisal on it, but it would have also been difficult to get bank financing. So owner financing, another success story.
William, can you remind us, for those who don't know, where Henniker is?
Henniker is about 20 minutes due west of Concord.
I live in the Manchester area, actually in the town of Goffstown. And even though the taxes are high in Goffstown, I like its proximity to Manchester, because that's where all the action is. If you like big cities, you probably would want to be near Manchester, Nashua, Portsmouth, Concord, maybe, about as small as you want to go. And that's where a lot of activism is. It's the highest concentration of Liberty folks right now in the state. So there's always something going on. If you're social and like to hang out in social circles, that's a great place to be. Although there are so many Free Staters and other Liberty folks around the state now in different areas that pretty much every region has a weekly, if not more often, if not more frequent, Liberty gathering and meetup. Okay, let's talk about, speaking of the Liberty community, have you guys in your businesses been able to sort of mix your business life with your activist life and build your business through Liberty circles? Or have you been able to employ people, for example, that you know through fellow activists circles?
Well, in the case of our business, it's entirely within the community completely. So as I mentioned earlier, it was difficult early because there just weren't a lot of movers, and these days they're flooding in, and so it's really boosted our business up to the point where, we're not losing money anymore. So that's step one. But it really, and I do consider it my activism. Running the place is what I do. It's a place where the Merrimack Valley Porcupines have their meeting, which is probably one of the largest and longest running Liberty meetup groups in the state. The Church of the Sword used to meet there. They've got a new place, Area 23, which is expanding out. We ran Free State Now from there, Peaceful Streets, and a lot of other activism-related activities that wouldn't happen without the space being there to support them.
Yeah, I've done some work with Free Staters, and I think basically in my line of work in engineering, you've got very specific projects and very specific skills that are needed to complete them. So sometimes, you're either doing the work yourself or you find somebody with a very specialized skill to do it. So that kind of limits the pool of people, that I would pick from to do specific projects. But that said, we had a booth at PorcFest. We were selling some items there. Just setting up things like 3D printer there to demo and to do some stuff, give people some freebies and things. And that kind of stuff I think is important, just to let people know that there is a business here. I mean, there is a tech business that somebody's running, and maybe that might inspire somebody. Maybe somebody's going to say, hey, you know, that's great. Here's my card. You know, I do this specific thing that is very uncommon and nobody knows that I do, but here, you know, now you know if you never need that skill. These networking opportunities are very important because you never know when you're going to find somebody that's really, really skilled at something that you might need or work on a development project at a later point.
As I mentioned in my business, almost exclusively my clientele is made up of Free State Project participants or other referrals from Liberty folks around the state. So that's been very rewarding. But on the other side, after people move in, they're always new to the area and they want to get referrals. So whenever possible, if people are looking for a handyman or a painter or a plumber, electrician, somebody to do some work around the house, polish the floors, do some landscaping, first people I turn to are others in the Liberty community who offer those services. And that said, they have to be competent and know what they're doing and trustworthy. But we always give them first shot at it, and that's worked out really well. I think it's one way for us to build our Liberty community from the ground up. It's not just through politics and education, but we have to do it through business, through economics, and ultimately by having more children within the community, as well as culture and media. So I think it's important for us to do that whenever we can. I have a small apartment building in Milton, New Hampshire, and I advertise that and give discounts to anybody who's a referral from the Liberty Group. I say it's guns and ganja friendly. I'm not going to give them a hard time if they have weapons in the property. They can pay by silver if they want. They can pay by gold or Bitcoin. I don't care.
And at our second location, and even before that, yes, we've done a lot of business with Free Staters that have included technical work, physically setting up networks, programming as far as accounting systems and the website go, construction, plumbing, electrical work, landscaping, all of that work can be done by Porcupines professionally.
Well, the word Bitcoin came up, and I heard it earlier this morning in a panel. So, Chris, I don't know if you are able to get paid in Bitcoin from your manufacturers yet, but have you had any experience with it professionally?
Actually, no, I've not had any experience receiving Bitcoin professionally. I mean, that might sound like a surprise, but my clientele usually have no idea what that means or what that even is. Manufacturing people very much are set in dollars. Everything's in terms of dollars because that's how they sell, that's how they're taxed, that's how they pay their employees, that's how they do everything, is dollars. So, and a lot of the folks that I do work for as well, they do report. So, unfortunately, I mean, you couldn't go to Fortune 500 company A and say, I want to be paid in Bitcoin or gold, because they'd probably not give you another contract. They would be, oh, this guy's a wacko. You know, that's really the world that I deal with on a daily basis. Is
you want an invoice that's net 30 and
yeah, exactly. We're net 90 now. It's gone it's gone 30, 60. Some people don't want to pay. I mean, it's just in big companies. You got to set up terms in the beginning. That's one piece of advice I've got to say. If you're working with a larger company, make sure you're clear about the terms when you set it up, because otherwise they will try and push it. I've got a friend that's running a machining company right now, and General Electric tries to push net 90 or net 120 on them. So that's just insane as far as
then you become a bank instead of a supplier.
You become a lender. That's exactly what it is.
Well, what about the barter system? Are you able to do any kind of barter or trade with some of your suppliers or vendors?
Yes, actually, we've got one company that we're very close with, actually located in Maine, and we do a lot of work on kind for them, you know, back and forth, that we'll do things for each other. For instance, I'll find something that's an opportunity to install one of their systems, and then they sell a system, and I also sell some sensors for that, or whatever. So it's kind of like a two-way street. You try and find work for them, and they try and find work for you.
Yes, I was going to ask you, William, with now that you're property manager at the Domes, have you had the opportunity to trade parcel rent for somebody doing work, or you take things other than U.S. dollars for the club membership?
We've done a fair amount of bartering, both rents with people who stay on the property and also with work that needs to be done on the property for memberships. And we look forward to doing a lot more of that. We're setting up some project management software so that we will have an easy way to list jobs that need to be done, and people can just say, yes, I'll do that, and what we're willing to pay for it, and what forms of payment we're willing to accept. And we do accept Bitcoin. I have this, the amount of Bitcoin coming in, this is both a good and bad problem to have. It's great that the Bitcoins are coming in. It's unfortunate for us that because of our cash flow situation, a large portion of the Bitcoins have to be converted every month into cash, and it's so sad to see those Bitcoins get converted back into dollars and used to pay bills. But there it is. But we do get to keep some of the Bitcoins in Bitcoin, so that's exciting.
All right, I see Lauren Canario in the audience, and I just wanted to do a shout out for porkmanor.com. Lauren has taken over that website. It's a great place for liberty-oriented folks to find rentals. Whether you're a landlord and you have a place for rent and you'd like to expose that to the Liberty community, or you're looking for a place to rent, pork with a C, of course, porkmanor.com. And thank you for taking over. That's a great thing. I have my building advertised there, and it's a great clearinghouse for pro-liberty housing. All right, do we have any questions? If you have some questions, please, yeah. Do you mind coming up to the mic just so we can hear it, please?
Hi, I'm Walter Augustine. My question is, has anyone done any marketing surveys to determine what needs are not being met in the community, such that you can entice people with certain skills and certain entrepreneurial tendencies to come to fill those needs?
That's a great question, Walter. And yes, every time we sit around the campfire at PorcFest, there are like 1,000 ideas on what we need. The one that comes to my mind, these guys will have some ideas, is we need more medical providers in the state who will work for cash. Medical and dental providers, anything in the medical healthcare field, because people who truly love liberty often are self-employed. They want to get out of these Obamacare and all these new regulations. We want people who don't care about that stuff and just either trade or accept Bitcoin, silver, or cash for medical care. And the problem is, of course, some of the licensing requirements, but it'd be nice to see some medical professionals from other states move here. Perhaps they're retired and they don't need to worry about the licensing rules so much anymore, and do a little bit of that. That's the first one that I think of.
Absolutely, we need dentists. Aside from that, there was a chiropractor, but I think he, unfortunately, due to personal issues, had to leave. You're saying another chiropractor has moved here, so yeah, okay, news to me.
That's right. Yeah. I think that's a great idea for a business. If you could play matchmaker to try and find specific people that are liberty leaning in other states and convince them, hey, you've got a good skill set, there's a market here in New Hampshire, and then connect them with people that need their services, I think that's a good business right there in of itself.
Carla?
Mark, could you talk a little bit about how much money you think Free Staters have brought into the state of New Hampshire, maybe by way of example of something like home sales?
Sure, I appreciate the question. We often talk about the economic impact of the Free State Project on a small state like New Hampshire. And just from a sort of a cursory anecdotal survey looking around, I know it's been at least $50 million over the last 5 or 6 years that has come into the New Hampshire economy just on home sales or home purchases. That does not include all the food and gas that people buy, all the liquor they buy, or even rents. That just purchases of real estate, of residential real estate. We recently placed a Free State Project member in 5,000 square feet of office space in Manchester on a 10-year lease. He's probably going to double that space next year and add another 25 employees. So I think it's probably upwards of $100 million all in. And as you know, people in this room typically are not net receivers. They're not the kind that ask for a lot from the government. They just want to be left alone. So we're productive types. We're not. Most people are not on welfare and taking the handouts. So all this is a positive economic impact, with almost no negative impact, other than a few of our friends down the county jail down here, right, for victimless crimes. And of course, a lot of jobs have been created. We talked about the part-time work, plumbers, electricians, handyman, that sort of thing, but also direct hires of people like Carrie DePhillips, who does PR, Mike and Vanessa, who do PR. They've hired people with high-level skills, and there have been some other people who've done entrepreneurial things and hired a number of freelance IT people and web developers as well. Hi.
Hello. Has there been any discussion on developing the local Bitcoin infrastructure, such as bringing, say, a Bitcoin ATM to town, or Satoshi Square, anything like that, so that people can get Bitcoins readily or convert them to cash, and pay you with Bitcoins, and without having to go through local Bitcoins and in an ad hoc fashion and seeing if anybody is selling at that time? Well,
maybe these guys can speak to a little bit better than I, but the developers of the ATM, of the Bitcoin ATM, it's called Lamasu. They're from Manchester. So they're where? They're Free Staters, yeah. These guys are developing, to my knowledge, the very first Bitcoin ATM. It takes your USDs and gives you a code, and you scan it, and you have Bitcoins in your phone or something like that.
Yeah. Contact the Harvey brothers over in Manchester. If you're interested in setting one up, if you've got a place, they might help you out. I don't know.
Also, a couple businesses have been approached. There's a lunch place in Newmarket that does accept Bitcoin for food sales, and a number of service providers, people who do technical writing, technical computer skill work, and even handyman work, will accept Bitcoin, but it's still in the nascent stages.
So what are the current regulations regarding Bitcoin ATMs? I know that for a while there was fewer than 10, and that there was, I forgot the acronym, but it's there was a federal agency, it's that's regulating that gave them some trouble, and that nipped it in the bud, so that's why they're few and far between.
There's a difference between whether or not, between an ATM that takes cash and gives you Bitcoin, and one that takes Bitcoin and gives you cash. So I'm not familiar with the details, but that's all I can tell you is that with these guys, it was much easier regulatory-wise for them to have the machine to take cash and give you a Bitcoin, but to do it the other way around would have run into some legal issues for them.
Do you live in New Hampshire, by the way?
Not yet.
Okay, because every Sunday night in Manchester, these guys have a Bitcoin meetup and have beers and discuss it, and I don't understand a word they're saying. But this also goes back to Walter's first question. There's a business opportunity. Go around to businesses and get them to take Bitcoin and maybe sell the service that is the interchange, or maybe start placing Bitcoin ATMs around the state. There's huge upside potential in that, I believe. Hello, Daryl.
Hello. I don't remember if it was Mark or William, one earlier, mentioned about some of the towns that does not have zoning. I think you had mentioned Grafton. I know that Lemster, which is not too terribly far from here, also has no zoning. What are some other towns that don't have zoning that people might be interested in looking to move to? Because I know that a lot of people just want to be left alone. They don't want to have to go buy a permit to hang a picture on their wall, or however far the government decides to take zoning of what they consider improvements to the house.
Warren doesn't have any zoning. I know that. I don't know if Joanna's here. Do you know any other towns, Joanna? Because we looked at a few. Ellsworth? Was Rumney one or no?
I think Rumney might be the other one.
Yeah.
Actually, on my website, which is porcupinerealestate.com, we have a link to the 10 towns in New Hampshire that have no zoning regulations. The farthest south is Lemster, which is about 40 minutes northeast of here, and then Grafton. Most of them are in Coos County or Grafton County, a couple in Sullivan County. But yeah, that's a great place to build your own home, build your own yurt, build your own cave, and start a business. Stay on your tippy toes there, Lauren.
Hi, I have a question for a lot of people that I talk to. They're very young. They have no experience. They have no money. They're wondering how they can start their own business and how could how do you grab hold of the bottom rung there if you're just starting out?
That's a hard question. You just kind of have to dive headfirst into it, I guess. You have to have ambition first. If somebody is young and they're interested in being entrepreneurial, they'll exhibit that. I mean, they'll be looking for opportunities and always trying to figure out ways to do things. But as far as mentoring people, I had the son of a Free State couple come into my office for a while, and he got some training on how to do some stuff and just saw, basically how I ran my business and just kind of just to observe, how that all works. So, I'm sure you can find business owners or people that are willing to to show somebody what they do in a daily basis so that a younger person or somebody who doesn't have skills or maybe they're right out of school or something can see how a business is being run of a certain type and see what the interactions are, see what kind of products are being made or services are being delivered or whatever. But that's a tough question though, because I think the first thing is that the person would have to have some entrepreneurial ambition too, and then maybe that could be sparked by somebody else, or they could find mentors.
It's a good question, especially in today's economy. I understand it's really tough to get a job if you're coming out of college right now. So there are a couple ways to do it. One is to be able to work for free or next to free. And the other is to approach people in your community of interest. As we spoke earlier, we like to help people in the community when we can. So if you are a Liberty person, anarchist, Free Stater, Ron Paul, or whatever, come to an event like this, ask around, ask for people who might be in the line of work that you are interested in, and just you have to go up and ask. If you can't just sit at your computer all day or stay at home, you got to get out and talk to people because they are willing to help. As long as you show some ambition, and you're willing to show up on time and work hard, I think there are plenty of opportunities out there.
Yeah, in the restaurant industry, I think it's called staging or something like that. Like a chef goes in and works for a couple of weeks on a trial basis until the restaurant decides that they're good. I wouldn't suggest doing that. I don't think that's a good thing. If you're doing services for somebody, you should ask for compensation. If you're providing a service to somebody, you should get compensated for it. I think the trick is finding people that are willing to take on somebody and understand that they have no training or background and just, hey, I'll show you what I do. You can do some tasks for me. I'll compensate you. And if you like this, then maybe we can figure something out more long term, or I can help you find somebody that I know that has a position or something like that. But yeah, it's networking, I think, mostly.
You really can't teach desire. I don't know how to. Sometimes you can inspire it in someone, but it seems to me that with entrepreneurship, people, they either have like a burning thing inside that drives them, because no matter what you do, you're going to have to pay your dues, and whether your dues are going to college for 4 years, or starting low in a company and working your way up, or sharing a studio apartment and eating ramen while you save money for that first thing that you're going to take a go at, and being willing to risk that and fail and just do it again.
That's it. That's the willing. Yeah, you can't be afraid to fail. That's the thing. Definitely, everyone makes mistakes. Everyone has failures, but you just have to get up and try again, because like I said earlier, it only takes one to make you a winner. And people that are just starting out need to understand that. There's this glorious ambition that people want to jump into something and make a huge business out of it and have success in several years, or big company, but that's not really how it happens. You kind of find your way in the dark, and not to sound discouraging, but to meet other people that have actually gone through the process and have made mistakes and done things can help so that somebody starting out doesn't make the same problem or doesn't make the same mistakes.
Or just get born into the right family and have a rich uncle who can put you into business.
Hi guys, this is kind of following on what she just said. She reminded me, I have some experience in a certain kind of entrepreneurship, I guess, that I haven't heard of anything like it in New Hampshire, but I can't believe it's not here, and that is with flea markets. I spend a lot of time selling at flea markets. Are there flea markets in New Hampshire?
Yeah.
There are a couple of big ones.
There's actually a like-minded guy who just started in Winchester. He's not that big yet, but he's picking up.
I don't know the answer to that question. They're not year-round like they are in a lot of places because it's cold here. But there's an indoor flea market, in effect. The guys up in Laconia, right? The guys in Laconia started what's, in effect, an indoor flea market. You can leave stuff there on consignment. But maybe that's an opportunity for you there.
I wasn't sure what the laws, regulations were about flea markets here, because I've never seen any notice of any flea market in New Hampshire.
Yeah, they would vary from town to town, but you're right. Now that you mentioned, I haven't seen a lot of them.
I feel like maybe Craigslist and a few things have taken a lot of the demand for them away, but that doesn't mean there's not a market.
Okay, we have 7 more minutes. Any final thoughts on either entrepreneurship or real estate? Or if you want to share some other stories of other entrepreneurs we know around the state, you can do that.
Sure. Yeah, I think if you ask a lot of people, the word entrepreneur or entrepreneurship is probably something that should appear in a diagnostic statistical manual for the psychologist, because a lot of people don't understand the passion that goes into something, and when you start a business, it becomes almost like a child, and that requires attention and love and commitment. And a lot of people that don't have an entrepreneurial passion or don't want to start their own business don't understand that, and it can make things difficult for communication to people that don't get it or don't understand why you're working 12 hours in a day for minimal pay. But people that do get it, you'll find that you can communicate very well with. There's an immediate connection, and you understand each other because you share the same passion. And I wouldn't want to call that like a support group or anything like that, but most of the Liberty people understand it, because self-empowerment and being able to be your own person, do your own thing is the heart of being an entrepreneur. In making something for yourself that nobody else has handed to you. It's independence. And Liberty people, whether they're running businesses or not, tend to understand that, and I think that's very refreshing.
I'd say there is a society of libertarian entrepreneurs. There's a chapter in New Hampshire. It is by invitation only, but if you're interested and you ask around, I imagine you can get an invitation.
We don't have to look very far to see an example of a fantastic entrepreneur right here in this room, and that's Ian Freeman. He and Mark moved up here. Yeah, let's hear it for those guys. I imagine Ian's in-your-face style didn't play too well on some of the regular radio stations, so he went ahead and did his own program, and they're nationally syndicated, well over 100 stations around the country right now. And he also started up his own network, LRN.FM. So Ian is a tremendous example of what entrepreneurship can do and give you freedom and let your voice be heard out there.
In my opinion, Ian is the reason that there's a Free State Project exists as it does at this point. I think to a large degree, many of us who signed up early and voted had already given up. I was planning on leaving the country, and he started the first 1,000 because the 20,000 just wasn't coming along. And he said, if we get just 1,000 signers, and people, I'll move my program there, people will start moving. And so I signed up for that first 1,000. And I think without the first 1,000 promotion, that really kicked it off the ground. How many other people here were part of the first 1,000 deal? Right.
All right, well, that wraps it up. Thank you guys for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. Stay tuned. We've got starting at 3 o'clock, so you got time to mingle and meet some folks here. 3 o'clock, and the raffle in the back. I'm going to get to that, Daryl. 3 o'clock, I believe we have the civil disobedience panel, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's right. So you'll be meeting some very interesting civilly disobedient folks. Some of them have been here a long time, and so hopefully it'll give us some interesting perspective. Don't forget, Daryl is sitting at that back table back there. He's got raffle tickets and all kinds of great prizes. So go back there and check that out. Tickets are as cheap as $1, and I think it's was it $12 for $10, $6 for $5, and for $25. He will give you the amount of tickets that is your height, your body height. So he'll start from the bottom and then raise the tickets all the way up to your head and give you that amount of tickets for the raffle. There's some killer prizes, which many of our attendees here have been very generous in donating, and the funds from the raffle will just be going right back into Keenevention. So again, thanks for that. Point of correction real quick, just since I heard the first 1,000 mentioned and I got all the credit for it, really that's not fair at all. I did not come up with that idea. The Free State Project, somebody in the Free State Project came up with it, and they came to Mark and I, and they said, hey, are you guys willing to help us promote this? And, basically act like it was your thing. It wasn't my thing, but we did promote it, so thanks for coming if you were in the first 1,000. If not, thanks for coming in the second 1,000. Secondly, I heard some Bitcoin talk. There was some Bitcoin questions. I just want to remind everyone we have the Bitcoin panel with the experts that you want to talk to. I mean, a lot of us know Bitcoin. We can help you get set up. In fact, I think Russell Canning was getting set up with Derek J back there as a brand new Bitcoiner. So there's plenty, ask around. We can certainly talk about it. But the Bitcoin panel is Sunday afternoon. And then there's a Bitcoin meetup that happens in Keene as well. That's also Sunday afternoon after Keenevention. We have some social events that'll be happening at McHugh's. The details are in your program guide. So that's something to keep in mind. Also mentioned recently in this panel was people in jail, and I want to remind you that our friend Rich Paul is currently in jail right now here in Keene, and it's possible for you to go visit him. If you would like to go see Rich Paul as one of your things to do during Keenevention, you can go to securistech.net/video visitation. If you go to the Keenevention website, there's a link there on the activities page, and you can get registered. You can sign up to go visit him. It's not an invasive process, believe it or not. In fact, since they've moved to the new system at the jail here in Keene, you can just go sign up on this website. You can show up. There's nobody that even checks ID anymore, which is amazing. I mean, to be able to walk into a jail and literally walk right in and visit somebody that nobody even asks who you are at this jail. So they've really changed how things operate. The bad news is that Rich Paul has been prohibited from having visits for the last week. So from what I'm told by Wendy, Rich will be available starting tomorrow. So if you go today to the video visitation site and you register for a visit tomorrow or Sunday, you should be able to see Rich, unless they've come up with some other nonsense reason to prohibit him from having visitors. It's like they're prohibiting him from having visitors for stuff like not making his bed, just petty nonsense like that. But I'm sure he would love to see you, even if you've never met Rich before. He's a really entertaining character. He's got a great sense of humor, and he's a lot of fun. And so even if you don't even know Rich, you've never met him before, it'll be worth your half an hour. You get a half hour with him. Take a group with you from Keenevention. Get 3 or 4 people and go and see Rich this weekend. I know he would really appreciate it.
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeene.com. FreeKeene.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. FreeKeene.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. FreeKeene.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.